In a remote time when there were endless herds of buffalo, the Crow lived a happy life, when the vast plains were unfenced. So said Crow Chief Plenty Coups. To the Crow, life is circular, infinite movement, a continuation of cycles. And while the buffalo days are gone, Crow life today is rich in tradition and proud heritage, and once again, the Crow live a happy life. Much of what is held sacred and dear to the Crow can be attributed to the great chiefs who fought to protect the Crow way of life as the white man made his way through the West. The last great Crow chief, Plenty Coups, was certainly a powerful figure in guiding the Crow to the future and helping them preserve their lands and what they call Crow country. Plenty Coups' life was one which transcended the old ways of buffalo hunting and intertribal warfare to the sedentary reservation life of farming and ranching, a life that Plenty Coups knew was destined to change. Plenty Coups advocated cooperation with the whites, which some Crows criticized.
As any great man, Plenty Coups had his supporters and his detractors as well. He had critics. And depending on where you go, you can hear one side or the other. However, when you take a positive approach, an optimistic approach, you can relate to this man's saying, his life, his reputation, and what he tried to represent in a particular sense about being friendly with your environment, with your neighbors, with other peoples. Said we cannot survive by ourselves. And that's why he encouraged the interplay between the whites and the Indians and the Crows, and he perpetuated this idea of being friendly and non-hostile to the whites, to the extent that he has critics who say, well, he went too far. But on the other hand, you find that his renown is far beyond that of any other contemporary of his or any previous leader, because his fame and his renown extended far beyond his leadership within the tribe. It went to other tribes, it went to other people, clear to Europe. Marshal Foch, the supreme commander of the American Expeditionary Forces and all the Allied forces in World War I, when he toured the United States of America, he asked that his train come by way of Billings, Montana, so he could meet Plenty Coups. And no other leader in the history of the Crow tribe has ever had that renown. The same is true of other Indian leaders. Some great leaders, but their reputation is at the pleasure of journalists and book writers and so on. And Plenty Coups maintained his integrity to the Crow way, in the Crow way, in many ways. Example, right behind us here, there's a grove of trees around the house. Frank Bird Linderman, when he did that, it was supposed to be an autobiography, but it turns out to be a biography of Plenty Coups, a great American, that book. And Frank Bird Linderman was disappointed because Plenty Coups would not tell exactly why he became such a great chief, because it's unbecoming of a Crow person to brag and to talk about themselves. So he'd ask him a direct question, well, what did you do that made you a chief? And he'd say, they will tell you about it. And he had friends and relatives and brothers-in-law sitting there, and they would tell the story. And then he would just confirm it by nodding or telling him that's so. But Frank Bird Linderman did not understand that Plenty Coups did things in his own way. Let me give you another example. At the Battle of the Rosebud, over on Rosebud Creek, east of Crow Agency, there was a battle there with General Crook going against the Sioux and the Cheyenne, and 176 warriors under Plenty Coups were with General Crook. And General Crook had his own ideas, he and his staff, of, for example, we're going to be fighting Indians with Indians. So who's a friendly Indian and who's not? So the Shoshone and the Crow warriors that were there were asked or were made to wear red sashes across like a bandolero, so that when the troopers saw An Indian with a red sash, that's a good Indian. And without a sash, that's a bad Indian. Try to destroy him. Plenty Coup said, we don't do that. Said if some of you want to wear red, go ahead. But the Crows don't wear red into battle, except crazy dogs who wear red because they're not afraid of blood. But we want to survive. We want to win. So in that battle, when the Sioux and Cheyenne began to close in on Crook, he and Washakie decided that we're going to fight them like we always did. Let's don't fight them like the white man wants us to. So that clearly demonstrates how Plenty Coup would go along with the flow, but in his own way. So we adapt as we go along, and I think that's a good example for present-day Crows, that we don't do it exactly as we think we're told, but to do it with our own background, with our own heritage, and with our own environment in mind.
Plenty Coups was a mountain crow and a member of the Sore Lips clan. He was dedicated to his people, and like other Crow leaders of his time, knew if the Crow were going to survive, they would have to adapt to the changing times.
Plenty Coups also had a similar dream. He saw his house right here, and the spring right there. So when the reservation headquarters was moved from Livingston to Crow Agency, Plenty Coups lingered behind the procession. They had a big caravan coming from there to Little Bighorn. But Plenty Coups lingered behind several days. So after the others passed through, he stopped here. That's where he's been ever since 1884. That's his sacred spring. And the house was built originally by the government carpenters. They went around building houses the first houses for the chiefs. Medicine Crow's house still is. It's a wreck now. And this one here, at first it was a small place, but log house. But they kept adding it, and finally it's quite a nice mansion. It's been renovated 4 or 5 times. I had to go back a little bit after the experience in Crazy Mountains. Medicine Crow and Plenty Coups and several other young men came and fasted right on top of the mountains here, the Pryor Mountains. And there, Plenty Coups had another vision of seeing the coming of the what he called white man's buffalo, that the buffalo were gone and the cattle come in. And along with them, a lot of white people started coming in. Then he saw a little chickadee in that vision of his being caught in a big storm, but he survived because he had proper sense to protect himself in some way, small but powerful. So with that, it was his concept from that point on that he's going to be like that little chickadee, notwithstanding the coming of the white man and the disappearance of the buffalo and all the attempts to take the white man taking the Indian land away from him, that he will survive. But you have to work with him. And so his policy is more or less a carrying on of Spotted Horse's advice of working with the white men. So Medicine Crow also had the same philosophy. You got to work with them now. You try to fight them, you'll end up like the Sioux. You'll be prisoners. You'll be mistreated. You'll be persecuted. So they too had a way of working with the government and politicians, and eventually they come out all right.
Plenty Coups' encouragement of education for his people runs strong in the minds of today's Crow people. The Little Bighorn College has helped the Crows ensure their place for generations to come. Janine Pease Pretty on Top, college president, explains Chief Plenty Coups would be extremely proud of his people today and in many ways envision today's technology for his people.
Plenty Coups was a visionary, and over the course of his lifetime, he had many important visions that he received when he fasted in high places. He was known to seek visions in the crazy mountains, one of the most difficult places to seek a vision. Very, very hard, harsh conditions there in the crazy mountains. But his vision, as he retells it to us, had to do with the small bird, the chickadee. The chickadee itself was all alone in a forest, a devastated forest, left in a particular tree. And the chickadee, observing that everything was decimated around him. Now, when Plenty Coups had that vision, he came down and he sought advice from elders in the interpretation of all of the images within that vision. And his elders advised him. They told him that it had to do with the chickadee symbolizing the Crow Nation, that the chickadee itself observed all things around it, observed all the other lodges, and learned from the lodges and the way they conducted their lives. The lodges are the four-leggeds, the other wingeds, the human beings, all lodges. And that from that observation, they could see where errors were made. And the Crow Nation wouldn't have to make those same errors. That the Chickadee Lodge would be preserved by that careful observation. And more than that, he said, his advisors told him that the chickadee uses his mind, not his physical might, to survive. And so Plenty Coups utilized that vision to constantly tell the Crow Nation to have a strong mind is more important than a strong body. And in so doing, probably contributed to the idea that the Crow Nation was as strong as the concept in our minds and our hearts, not necessarily physical might. I think that Plenty Coups would approach a group of Crow Indian people and he would say, the new technology is important. The computers, the information highway. He would say, these are the new horse. These are the new ways that our people can take up to live a good life. He said those things by taking up ranching and farming when he had been living in the buffalo days. So my thinking on that is that he believes in taking up the new tools, utilizing them to the best way possible, and making them serve the Crow people. So he really was a person who could transition into new technology. He would admonish the people. He would say, use this new technology to the best of your ability to make a good life. And he would refer to things like computers, mechanization of all different kinds. I believe that's the sort of example that he set for us, and he would say that to us today. But more than that, he would say, our nation needs defense. Our nation needs defense, needs education for its defense, needs tools for its defense. He had a very, very well-developed idea of the power of living together as a nation. And he wanted to see Crows go on into the future. In his way of living, he could envision many generations yet to come. And he often characterized that in his speeches. He would admonish the Crows to think about where the nation will be many generations yet to come. As an educator, I look at Chief Plenty Coups as a master educator. And that refers to the way in which he had a relationship with people in the Crow Nation, a relationship to the young men, a relationship to the other fellow chiefs. And so let me just suggest that he is a master in a master apprenticeship kind of relationship. Plenty Coups was very interested in the insight of the young Crow men who had returned from Carlisle. This is very unique because oftentimes the young men or young women who came back from boarding schools were not trusted by the tribal leaders. But with the Crows and with Chief Plenty Coups, he took every opportunity to seek advice from these young men who had attended Carlisle Indian School. And he surrounded himself with their wisdom and their insight and relied on their judgment. He asked them to translate and articulate the position of the Crow Nation on behalf of the people. To have faith in young people is a tradition, I think, that the Crows have taken from Chief Plentycoups. It's extremely important as we move into the future that we have faith in our young people and their insight into all of the dynamics of our lives, no matter what era. Plentycoups didn't have a doubt in the young men, the young Crow men who had been sent to boarding school. He didn't have a fear or a mistrust of them. He said, these are our young men. They are well educated, and they have insights and wisdom. I have faith in them, he said. He said that a number of times in front of the Crow Indian Council. Another characteristic that Plentycoups has for us is that he sought advice. As a leader, he didn't rely entirely on his own insights and his own thinking on events, his own strategies that he designed in isolation, but rather he called the chiefs together. They talked in council. He talked with his family. He sought advice from young people. And that ability to listen, that ability to seek advice, sets a tremendous example. Once again, the master that Plentycoups was. He appeared before the Crow Tribal Council all throughout his lifetime. But one time as an elder statesman, he addressed all the